Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Speak Smart podcast.
It's great to be here.
Today, we're diving into something that might seem basic at first.
Yeah.
Making appointments.
Mm-hmm.
You know, those things we all do, whether it's for a doctor,
Right.
or a haircut,
Exactly.
or even a job interview.
Absolutely.
But we're going to tackle it from a really unique angle.
Oh.
Our source material is actually from an Easy English Learning podcast.
Interesting.
Now, I know you might be thinking, wait, I'm already fluent. But that's what makes this so cool.
Okay.
We're going to look at it through the eyes of someone learning English as a second language,
I see.
which forces us to break down the steps and think about assumptions we usually just take for granted.
It's fascinating how that approach can really highlight things we might otherwise miss.
Right.
Yeah, like getting a fresh perspective on something we do all the time.
Exactly. It's like hitting the reset button on our communication skills.
I like that.
So the podcast episode we're using starts at the basics, defining what an appointment even is.
Right.
And then it goes into those key words.
Like schedule or book.
Yes. Confirm, reschedule, all those words.
To a native speaker, those might seem like you could use them all the same way.
I can see that.
But I'm curious about, the subtle differences they might actually have.
What's really fascinating is how those simple words actually have different weights to them,
Oh,
depending on the context.
so give me an example.
Sure, like schedule might feel more formal, right?
Like for a doctor's office.
Exactly. But then book.
Maybe for a haircut.
Yeah. Or a restaurant reservation.
Like more casual.
And realizing those little differences can make our communication so much more precise.
And prevent misunderstandings.
That's a great point. I hadn't really thought about that formality level before.
It's like choosing the right tool for the job, right?
Totally. You wouldn't use a hammer to tighten a screw.
Exactly. And speaking of tools, the source material actually provides a script for making appointments over the phone.
Oh yes, those phone calls.
We've all been there, right?
Absolutely. Where you suddenly feel flustered or unsure what to say next.
Especially with those automated systems sometimes.
Ugh, the worst.
Or when you're trying to explain something specific and the words just won't come out right.
It's like stage fright, but on the phone.
I know exactly what you mean.
So looking at the script they give, what do you think is most helpful, even for someone who's already comfortable speaking English?
What I like is how clear and concise it is.
Yes.
It reminds us to state our purpose right away
You get right.
and give all the important info, but without rambling,
Stay on track.
then confirm all the key details before ending the call.
It's like a little verbal checklist.
That makes sure we cover all the bases.
I love that.
And even for a native speaker, having that structure can be so helpful, especially when we're nervous.
It's true.
Like having a roadmap so you don't get lost.
It reduces the anxiety and helps us stay focused.
Exactly. Now let's think about a situation that can be even more nerve-wracking.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
Making those calls when English isn't your first language.
The source material mentions it.
But I'd love to hear your expert take on navigating those calls.
Well, I think one of the biggest things is to be prepared.
Okay, how so?
Like before even dialing, jot down key phrases you might need.
Ah, so you have them right in front of you.
It's like a little cheat sheet for the call.
I love that. And it can boost your confidence too, knowing you have that support.
Exactly. Another thing, speak slowly and clearly.
It's natural to want to rush when you're nervous.
Oh, for sure.
But taking your time lets the other person really process what you're saying.
Especially if there are language barriers.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to ask for clarification.
Or repetition.
Yes. It's much better to double check than to have a misunderstanding later.
Couldn't agree more.
And technology can be a huge help these days too.
Oh, but definitely.
Translation apps, online dictionaries.
Like having a personal interpreter right there in your pocket.
Exactly. So you're never really alone in the conversation.
So let's shift gears a bit and talk about the different types of appointments people make.
Okay.
The source material breaks them down into categories. Doctor, dentist, haircut, things like that.
What do you see as the common thread across all those different scenarios?
Well, one thing that really stands out to me is the importance of clearly communicating your needs.
Oh, I see.
Whether it's describing a symptom to the doctor or explaining the haircut you want.
Or even outlining a project to a potential client?
Exactly.
Oh.
That clear, concise information is essential for things to go well.
It's like that saying, the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
But in this case, it's the clear communicator gets the desired results.
I like that. And building on that idea of clear communication, we also have to be mindful of the specific context for each type of appointment, right?
What do you mean by that?
Well, Like with a doctor's appointment, you'd be ready to describe your symptoms in detail.
But for a haircut, maybe you'd bring photos.
Or have a really clear vision of the style in your head.
So it's tailoring your approach based on the situation.
Precisely. Another important factor is how urgent the appointment is.
Yes, the urgent versus routine dilemma.
The source material mentions it.
But let's dig into that a bit more.
Okay.
How do we convey urgency without coming across as demanding or pushy?
It's a delicate balance.
It really is.
I think the key is being direct, but also respectful.
So you state the reason for needing something urgently.
But without being overly dramatic or making unreasonable demands.
Like instead of, I need to see the doctor right now, it's an emergency.
Which can make people shut down.
It might be more like, I'm experiencing symptom and I'm worried it could be serious. Could I get an appointment as soon as possible?
That's much better. You're giving context, but not causing unnecessary alarm.
And leaving room for the other person to help.
Exactly. You're being assertive, but not aggressive.
And I bet tone of voice is really important here too.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just the words we say, but how we say them.
If you sound panicked, it makes it harder for people to understand.
It can even make them less helpful sometimes.
So it's that sweet spot between conveying the urgency, but staying calm and respectful.
Exactly. It's like a communication tango, isn't it?
I love that analogy. Finding the right balance and flow.
And while we're on the topic of finding balance, let's move to another key part of making appointments. Asking about the duration.
Yes, the how long will this take question.
The source material highlights it.
But I'm curious about your take on why that simple question can have such a big impact.
It's more than just knowing how long you'll be in the dentist chair, right?
Right. It's thinking about travel time, potential wait times.
And any other tasks you have that day.
Being proactive and planning ahead.
And it all ties into respecting everyone's time.
And speaking of that, the source material really emphasizes the importance of confirmation.
Confirmation is crucial.
It's true.
It prevents those missed appointments.
And wasted time.
But it also shows you're professional and reliable.
It demonstrates that you value the other person's time.
And that you're organized. On the flip side, not confirming, or even worse, not showing up.
It can really damage your reputation.
People might be less willing to accommodate you in the future.
It's a simple act, but with big consequences.
Absolutely. It's about building trust and rapport.
So confirming is like a small investment.
That pays off in smooth communication.
A good professional image.
Exactly. It's a win-win situation.
So true.
But let's be honest, sometimes things don't go perfectly, even with the best planning.
Oh, absolutely. Life happens.
And that brings us to those oops moments when, despite our best intentions, we find ourselves running late.
The dreaded running late scenario. The source material gives some scripts for that.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about the psychology involved.
So interesting.
How do we apologize sincerely while still preserving that relationship and minimizing the damage?
It's all about acknowledging the inconvenience you've caused and expressing genuine regret.
Without making excuses.
Exactly. Take ownership.
So instead of, I'm so sorry I'm late, traffic was a nightmare.
Which can sound like you're shifting the blame.
It's more like, I'm so sorry I'm running late. I really appreciate your understanding.
That's much better. You're taking responsibility and expressing gratitude.
And I bet tone of voice makes a big difference too.
Oh, absolutely. A sincere and apologetic tone goes a long way.
It shows you care about the impact your lateness has had.
And it's interesting how this all ties back to that idea of mutual respect.
Right.
Even when we mess up, we can still show respect by acknowledging the inconvenience.
And taking steps to make things right.
Exactly. Even in those oops moments, we can uphold those communication principles.
It's like those little moments are actually a test.
A test of our character. Now let's flip things around.
Okay.
What about when it's the other party who messes up?
Cancellations, reschedulings.
The source material covers some of that.
And I think this is where things can get tricky for people.
Why is that?
Because it's advocating for your own needs.
While still being polite.
Exactly. It's that balance between assertiveness and not wanting to step on toes.
I see. So how do we strike that balance?
I think clear and assertive communication is key.
Like how would you handle a last-minute cancellation, for example?
Well, you could say something like, I understand things come up, but I was really counting on this appointment. Would it be possible to reschedule as soon as possible?
That's great. You're acknowledging their situation, but also stating your needs.
And I imagine being willing to negotiate is important too.
Absolutely. You might need to be flexible.
Offer alternatives.
It's like a collaborative problem-solving process.
Working together to find a solution.
And remember, you also have the right to decline or reschedule.
If it just doesn't work for you.
Exactly. Knowing your boundaries is crucial.
Now, bringing it back to our source material, let's talk about language barriers.
A very relevant topic.
The episode talks about using clear language, speaking slowly, and using translation apps.
All great tips. What else would you add for navigating appointments when language is an obstacle?
Patience and understanding on both sides.
Important.
Remembering that communication breakdowns happen even when we all speak the same language.
So even more so when there are additional barriers.
It's about giving each other a bit of grace.
And, nonverbal communication can be even more important in these situations.
Oh, absolutely.
A smile, a nod, a patient expression.
They can bridge those communication gaps.
It's about creating that welcoming atmosphere.
Where everyone feels comfortable, even if there are challenges.
It takes effort from both sides.
Exactly. Communication is a two-way street, and everyone has a role to play in making it successful.
I love that.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of appointments, what are the biggest takeaways for our listeners?
I think one of the most crucial things is to approach appointments with intention.
Okay, I like that.
It's not just checking them off a to-do list, but really considering what you want to get out of them.
Being proactive.
Exactly. And the other thing is to remember, appointments aren't just about getting things done.
There's a human element.
It's about building relationships too. Treating everyone with courtesy and respect.
Even when things get tricky.
Especially then. And lastly, never stop learning.
I like that.
Whether you're a native English speaker or still learning, there's always something new to discover about how we communicate.
It's a lifelong journey, always improving.
Exactly.
Now, to your challenge for our listeners,
Right.
What's one small action they can take to apply all these insights to their very next tea appointment?
I'd say pick one area we discussed today. Just one. Maybe it's confirming the details beforehand.
Or practicing that running late script.
Or even just organizing your appointment notes.
Little changes can make a big difference.
It's about building those habits.
And here's a final thought for everyone. We often see appointments as those boxes to check off.
Yeah.
But what if we saw them as opportunities?
Opportunities for what?
For connection, for collaboration.
I love that.
Every appointment, whether it's a doctor, an interview, even a haircut, it's a chance to engage with another human being.
There's that potential for a real exchange.
It might sound cheesy, but even the mundane can become meaningful.
It's all about perspective.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
My pleasure. It's been a great conversation.
We hope you've gained some valuable insight.
To help master the art of appointments.
To all our listeners, thank you for being here.
And until next time.
Thank you for listening to the Speak Smart podcast.